surprise. Tonight we're wandering into one of the weirdest corners of medieval life. The strange things people actually did for fun. Spoiler alert. There were no phones, no Netflix, and definitely no escape rooms. So what did people do? Well, they raced pigs, wrestled for cheese, and believed farting contests were a valid form of entertainment. It was a world where boredom met creativity in the most unpredictable ways. So, before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. The sun rolled slowly over the hills like a lazy egg, spilling golden yolk across the damp rooftops of a village too old to remember its own name. Smoke curled from crooked chimneys, not in any real hurry, and the mud in the street squelched with the sort of noise that made you question your life choices if your bare foot landed in it. And somewhere in the distance, the rooster didn't crow. He was awake. He just didn't feel like it. Perhaps he had laryngitis, or an existential crisis. Or maybe, after watching the same people trip over the same bucket every morning for the past 3 years, he decided to boycott the whole charade. Whatever the reason, the silence was noticeable, which made the sound of the baker's boy falling off the stool all the more dramatic. A loud thud, followed by a string of words he'd absolutely deny saying in front of his mother, echoed through the bakery as he rubbed the side of his head and blamed the oven for existing. The bakery itself was still warm from yesterday's coals, and the air inside smelled like sleep and flour and someone's forgotten sock. A lump of dough sat stubbornly on the counter, refusing to rise out of pure spite, and the baker, an old man with arms like tree trunks and a temper like a thundercloud, snored loudly behind the sacks of rye. Outside, the village stretched awake one joint at a time. A dog scratched its ear against the side of a cart. A pig sneezed. A cow named Gertrude, still half asleep, wandered into someone's laundry. No one noticed. Or if they did, they decided it wasn't their business. 2 elderly women sat on a bench near the well, wrapped in shawls and opinions. One of them had already commented that the sun was too bright and probably a bad omen. The other was convinced the missing rooster crow meant someone had died, or would die, or had just forgotten to wind the sun properly. She wasn't clear on the theology, but she was certain it involved goats. A boy with a mop of hair and a tunic, 2 sizes too big, tiptoed past the church, holding a bucket with 1 fish in it. The fish looked judgmental. The boy looked guilty. He was supposed to deliver it to the reeve, but he was thinking very seriously about eating it himself, scales and all. He passed the tavern just as a bleary-eyed man stumbled out, 1 boot missing, a chicken under his arm, and a daisy tucked behind 1 ear. The chicken looked concerned. Meanwhile, the rooster, whose name no one remembered because no one had bothered to name him, stretched 1 wing, fluffed his feathers, and stared down at the village from the thatch roof of the blacksmith's shed. He watched the baker's boy burn his finger. He watched a child fall into a puddle and not get up because he was pretty sure if he stayed there long enough someone might bring him a plum. The blacksmith's forge hissed to life. The hammering would start soon, and with it the daily symphony of irritation. But not yet. For now, the village was in that in-between moment. Too late to be night, too early to be properly awake. The liminal space of yawns and scratched heads and forgotten chores. The cows were confused. The chickens were muttering among themselves. A goat chewed a boot and made eye contact with someone's grandmother. She didn't blink. Then came the cart. The wheels squeaked in protest, pulled by a donkey that looked like it had seen things. The driver, an old man with 3 teeth and a contagious laugh, shouted good morning like it was a war cry. No one responded, not out of rudeness, but because most of them hadn't had their first mead or mushroom tea yet and were deeply suspicious of enthusiasm. Finally, with a grunt and a flap of wings, the rooster let out a sound that could best be described as a sneeze trapped inside a yawn, followed by a suspicious silence and a deeply embarrassed shuffle on the roof tiles. A woman hanging laundry looked up and muttered, "About time," before snapping her sheet so hard it could have doubled as a flag. And just like that, the village surrendered to the day. Boots were pulled on, aprons tied, bread shoved into ovens. Children were yelled at to stop licking fence posts. Somewhere, a bell rang. Nobody knew why, but everyone assumed it meant something. The blacksmith began to curse rhythmically. The priest practiced his sermon with a stick and a sheep. The sheep disagreed with his theology. By the time the sun was fully up, the rooster had gone back to sleep. His job, as far as he was concerned, was done. He'd made a noise. People were moving. The world, however broken and ridiculous, was turning again. And if no one had quite noticed the exact moment the day began, that was fine. It wasn't the sort of place where things started cleanly. Here, mornings didn't arrive. They shuffled in, lost a boot in the mud, and hoped no one asked too many questions. The first true scent of morning wasn't the bread. It wasn't even the fire. It was the warm, wet slap of old porridge hitting a wooden bowl and the unmistakable tang of someone's breath who had not, by any stretch of the imagination, met a mint leaf in recent memory. In the corner of a crooked cottage, the hearth gave a grumble. Flames licked lazily at damp logs, protesting their workload, while a woman with one eyebrow and zero patience stirred a pot that looked suspiciously like it had never been emptied. The porridge inside bubbled with a resentful plop, thick enough to stand a spoon in, thin enough to slide off when no one was looking. Her husband, already shirtless and already sweating, sat hunched over a hunk of rye so dense it might qualify as a weapon in some kingdoms. He took a bite and paused halfway through chewing, not out of delight but calculation. Was this the same piece from yesterday, or had it been reincarnated from last week's loaf? Either way, it tasted like dust and commitment. Next door, a young girl was pouring reused ale into a cracked clay cup for her grandfather, who claimed it settled the stomach, despite strong evidence to the contrary. The cup itself had a chip shaped exactly like the bishop's nose, a fact the family mentioned often and laughed about never. Outside, more hearths began their morning chorus. Wood snapped. Metal clanged. Somewhere, someone screamed, "Not again!" And a chicken was launched gently out of a window. The rituals had begun. Hygiene in the village was more of a suggestion, a whisper, an idea one might consider if time allowed, and it usually didn't. A man stood shirtless by a water barrel, splashing his face with such ferocity you'd think he was trying to erase it. Another used the corner of a tunic that clearly belonged to someone else to wipe his nose. A woman scrubbed her armpits with a handful of moss and muttered something that may have been a prayer or a curse. Maybe both. Tooth care was creative. Some chewed sticks. Others rubbed ashes on their gums with their fingers. One bold soul insisted on using sour milk, claiming it scared the rot away. It also scared away conversation. In one home, a child with tangled hair attempted to tame it by licking his palm and smacking his curls into submission. His mother watched and said nothing, mostly because she was too busy trying to remove a slug from her shoe without waking the baby balanced on her back. The bread ovens, at least, were a source of pride. That is, if your definition of pride included guessing whether today's crust would crack your teeth clean or just chip them slightly. The dough was often